A disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, and this talk is not legal advice. We're going to see later why. And everything I'm saying is personal view, and it does not represent any organization that I am or I was affiliated with. So we're going to talk about, first of all, why we need a decentralized storage. Then what is Swarm and how it works. So we're going to see the academia routing, the storage incentives, the B nodes, and then we're also going to see a real-life use case on why it matters and what we can do with it as of today. So yeah, this is me. The first time I spoke at a conference about academia routing, I was so excited. And since I love memes, my friend made this. So why does it matter? As of today, Amazon Web Services and Google have practically control over internet and over the cloud market. So every time there is a mistake, every time Google goes down or AWS goes down, the internet stops. Like it happened a few years ago that Google went down for a few hours and the internet went crazy. People were stuck in the elevators, they couldn't turn on the lights in their home, or they were like stuck in a room with like loud music and they couldn't stop it. And that happens quite frequently. And this is because the list of issues that comes with centralization is quite long. We have data loss, we have the platforming, we have censorship, we have surveillance and surveillance capitalism. We have, well, first of all, it's also not cost efficient. And it's not efficient at all, like we saw before with people getting stuck in the elevators. And it has problems with scaling and latency. So now, fortunately, all those problems can be addressed today with decentralization and decentralized platforms like Swarm. There are various solutions in the market. I'm going to be talking about Swarm because it's the one I know best. I work for them. So yeah, what is decentralized storage? Swarm is a decentralized storage and communication system ready to power the next generation of censorship-resistant, unstoppable, and serverless dApps, which is a lot of words to say something very simple. Swarm is a decentralized solution designed to address the problems that we saw before. There are a few key points that we're going to see. We're going to see how you upload data. To do so, we're going to see the B nodes and chunks of data. Then we're going to see how B nodes and data communicate with academia routing and the storage incentives. So let's start. When you upload a file on the network, it can be an app, it can be a simple file, a website. It gets divided into small chunks. And each of those chunks is being stored separately on the network. Now, if you want, you can also encrypt the chunk so that it adds a layer of security. And this is important because if you get a file, and of that file, you get a single pixel, you cannot reconstruct the entire file. So in this way, you're safe. Also, if you're storing only one pixel of the file, you don't know what you're storing. So you have what we call plausible deniability over storage. And so, can I please have the new presentation? No. OK, so now the files are being stored on the network, on the B nodes. So each file is being stored on different nodes all across the network. And that is very important because it allows to store them in a redundant way. But now, of course, like when you store a file in the network, then how do you make sense of the file? So here, for example, wait. we have, there are two nodes, Alice and Dave, and they both have an address. Alice's address starts with all zeros, and Dave's address starts with all one. So if you want to send a message from Alice to Dave, the question is, how do we get there? What kind of connectivity patterns do we make in order to get to Dave? Now, here there are only 16 nodes, so it's kind of simple. But if there are thousands of nodes, like it is in the Swarm network, it gets more complicated. So we need to make sense of the network. So the first step, if Alice wants to send a message to Dave, she has to split the network in half. And she does that. Half of the nodes starting with 0 and half of the nodes starting with 1, like Dave. And then she makes one connection in the other part of the network with a different first bit. But still, that's still too complicated. So in order to bring order to the network, she divides her part of the network again in two. Nodes with a different second bit and nodes with the same second bit. And she goes on, and she makes a connection in bin 1, and she does the same and splits a quarter of the network again, nodes with the same third bits, and nodes with a different third bits. And we call them bin 2. And we make one connection. So everything left, we call it the nearest neighborhood. Nodes with a very similar address are connected and are called nearest neighborhood. So now in real life, if we have 12 nodes, the number of nodes goes up and down. So of course, we need to ensure that we can always cooperate. So in this way, Alice makes sense of the network. But we still have the question on how does Alice connect to Dave? So as we've seen, Alice is connected to Bob. But Bob is not the same as Dave. So how can she send the message? If Bob follows the same order as Alice, we cannot guarantee that Bob is directly connected to Dave, but we can guarantee that Bob is actually a bit closer to Dave and can send a message to someone that can send a message to Dave. So how does it happen? So Alice wants to send a message to Dave, but she's not connected to him. So what she does is that she reaches out to Bob. And so she sends a message to Bob because she knows that Bob's address is closer to one of Dave's. Now, Bob itself is not connected to Dave, but he knows Carol, which is in the middle. So, and Carol is more likely to know Dave. So Bob asks Carol, and Carol actually knows Dave. And this is actually super important because she is able to send a message to Dave. And this is how Alice connects to Dave in the network, but also how she sends message to any other nodes in the network. Now, why is this important? First of all, because it ensures that Dave and Alice can connect. But, and this is the most important thing, it ensures that Alice doesn't know we're storing Dave. And she doesn't know that the message ends with Dave. And Dave, on the other hand, doesn't know that the message originates from Alice because of this way, so you never know where it starts and where it ends. So this is important because it guarantees anonymity at the network level. So then there is another point. Why does it happen? Why do people participate in that? When was the last time that you did something out of pure altruism? Because this is not what happens in the network. And that's why we have incentives. Incentives are important for participation in providing stereo space. It's not just pure altruism wanting to contribute to a better world, but to make sense of the resources that we have and also to limit uploads and avoid scammers and spammers. So this is because storage resources need to be allocated in an efficient way. People who want to upload data can decide which data is the most important for them to upload. And the goal is to store as much content as possible with redundancy so that if a node goes down, still the content is uploaded on the network. And it also incentivizes users and storers so that demand and supply will match. Users should pay and storers should be rewarded. Now, how does it work? It's quite simple. The cost is the same for all the uploaders, and it will change over time with an on-chain oracle that limits the balance of supply and demand of storage. And the price is redistributed across all the nodes in the network in a probabilistic manner. In the Swarm network, the content is uploaded and downloaded into small chunks. Like we saw before, when you upload a website, an app, it gets divided into small chunks, and each one of those chunks gets uploaded on the network. And since it's not practical to pay for each piece of chunk every time you upload it or you request it, you pay in batches. At the time of the payment, the uploader registers a public key for which they possess the corresponding private key, and they receive a batch ID. When uploading a chunk, the uploader must sign each chunk with a batch ID using the private key. So this signature, along with the metadata, is referred to as postage stamps. And it works kind of like in a similar way to postage stamps. Like maybe we don't go to the post office anymore that often, but it's the same idea as the traditional mail. And after completion of the on-chain transaction, the balance of the batch equals the amount paid, and it goes down. And over time, of course, the postage stamps base, so the amount that you have is reduced in a way that is similar to the prepaid phone calls, like the one we used to have back in the days. And when the balance reaches zeros, and you're not paying anymore for the storage, then it gets collected by storers as garbage. And the balance that has not expired can be topped up. So that if you want a website to still be up, it's very simple. You just need to top up the balance, and you keep on having the corresponding batches. Now, question is, why does it matter? Because this sounds super cool in theory. But it's still, it sounds like very abstract. Unfortunately, I don't have the slide for this, but who knows what Venezuela, France, and China have in common? Does anyone know what they have in common? So they all at some point censored Wikipedia. And this is because Wikipedia, as of today, is being stored in 6 data centers between Europe, the US, and Singapore by private actors like Equinox or CyrusOne. Now, back until like 10 years ago, Wikipedia was running on HTTP. So that means that it could be censored only like on small pages. So for example, if an ISP, and that happened that internet service providers were able, and they did it, censored small pages of Wikipedia. So like they didn't like one entry, they will go and just take it down. Then when Wikipedia moved to HTTPS, that was not possible anymore. So I guess if they want to censor Wikipedia, they have to take it all down or not at all. So quite often Wikipedia gets censored in a country or in another one. And that unfortunately is very common. As you can see, this type of storage, let me go back to the swarm slide. Yeah. If you use swarm as a storage, that doesn't happen. So a real case that we developed is to put a mirror copy of Wikipedia on the swarm network. That means that you can use a simple gateway, and you can run your own B node, and it stays on the network, and it cannot be censored. And this is because, decentralized storage can be super fun, but it can also be super abstract if we don't look at real use cases like Wikipedia. So I think that's all, and thank you. If you have more questions, or if you want to know more how the Swarm network works, please come over to me and to my colleague that is up there. And yeah, we're happy to answer any of your questions.
Thank you, Costanza. We would like to remind you again to submit your questions through the Slido app. If anyone has questions, or maybe people are just too hungry and looking forward to speak to you outside with the food, we will wait for a few more seconds.
Don't be shy.
Okay. We have a question. Competitors Filecoin?
So yeah, there are several actors in the space, and Filecoin is one of them. However, personally, I don't like to think of Filecoin as a competitor because we are fighting the same battle. Like all the Web3 storage players, we are still fighting to make internet decentralized, censorship-resistant, and privacy-focused. There are differences between Filecoin and Swarm. Yes, of course there are. But at the end of the game, I think that the competitors are like Google and AWS, and we are like allied in fighting the same battle.
Thank you. We have another question. How can Web3 or decentralized media help with censorship in emerging democracies?
Okay, so one of the key elements of democracy, of the right to democratic governance, is freedom of information. This is because in order to have democracy, you need to vote. And to vote, you need to be informed and know what you're voting for. So you need to vote, you need to be informed about your governments, about the people that you're voting for. Of course, what happens very often is that there is an internet shutdown, like in the case of, I watched an amazing presentation in Denver about Tigray, where there is an internet shutdown, or there is the governments that block internet. And so when it comes to an internet blockade, when the government attacks one server, one provider, just imagine with Amazon, if I have a newspaper, I'm storing my newspapers in a single point. So she is the Amazon. So it's very simple. If I'm the government and I want to transfer that, I just block access to it. And it's quite simple. With decentralized storage, I take the same website, I divide it into small pieces, and each one of you is going to store one piece. So it's impossible to block it all because there are so many nodes in the network. There are thousands of nodes in the network, so it cannot be censored. And if it cannot be censored, then that means that it's easier to have free media. And if we have free media and we have freedom of information, if we have access to Wikipedia, then we can have the right to democratic governance. And when we vote, when we have elections, we are actually free to decide what to vote for. So in that sense, decentralized storage can be crucial for emerging democracies and to the right of democratic governance.
Thank you. We have another question. What are the current biggest challenges while explaining decentralized storage and Swarm to potential users or partners?
There are a lot of challenges right now to present it. It depends who you're talking with. If we are talking to activists, to people that are working in emerging democracies and are working for free media and free elections, they get it. But if you speak to someone that doesn't care, then it adds a layer of complexity in explaining it and also in adoption. So the first thing, I think it will say that we need to make people care about it. We need to explain and to make people passionate about censorship resistance and deplatforming and privacy. So often, when I speak to potential partners or to companies, what they say is, yeah, but I don't see the added value. And this is because most people still don't know about it. We are still very early, and we are still in the evangelization phase, where we need to make people understand that we are addressing a lot of problems. I think that's the most important.
Thank you so much, Costanza. It was lovely listening to your lecture. Very informative and very inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.